It's important to understand past events in order to shape the future. That's the focus for Sierra Whaley's final story for Black History Month. Sierra, what can you tell us?
We are at our final segment for Black History Month. While it's been the goal to discover historical figures and stories unique to Maine's history, it's also good to find those who are making history as we speak. We're going to introduce you to Jerry Edwards, commonly known as Genius Black, who uses his skills to acknowledge the past to shape the present.
I am releasing episodes of the Maine's Black Future podcast.
Texas native Jerry Genius Edwards began writing as a kid. That was the beginning of a passion that at the time he didn't even know was there. Like many Texans, he was heavily involved in sports.
I grew up playing basketball, trying to learn how to dunk at the local elementary school with the homies.
Were you successful?
At dunking?
Yeah.
Only at the end of high school could I actually dunk.
You got there, though.
Yeah, I did get there. Yeah.
His journey in Maine started in 2000 when he attended Bowdoin College, where he found his art of storytelling.
The modalities of storytelling are important to me, as well as things that I don't want to say I'm working on mastery of, but I'm working on being deftly cold at executing them.
Now a photographer, videographer, music producer, and DJ, Edwards uses his expertise through his podcast called Maine's Black Future.
The concept came from the fact that yearly I would explain certain things to people about Black History Month, for instance. Juneteenth too, but Black History Month. And I found myself in a place of frustration that I'll encapsulate by saying, why are you talking about Black history like it's dead?
So he created the podcast with a unique approach.
In every episode, you experience the breadth or the trajectory of Black excellence and Black influence in the state of Maine. Opens with a historical section where I highlight a historically Black Mainer. Could be from the 1800s, 1900s, it can be from the 1980s. And then I move into a conversation that's a bit longer with a current Black changemaker who I perceive to be influencing or affecting the state of Maine in some way. Early at Bowdoin, I was introduced to John Brown Russwurm, the United States' third African-American or Black graduate of a college, and the first one from Bowdoin College in the year 1826. I always felt pride and closer to Bowdoin College as an institution once I learned about his story. He was also just a brilliant Black man.
As he discovers each story, educates listeners on the past and present, he wants people to understand there are years of Black history in Maine that's documented. It's no surprise to some, but to others who aren't informed about these stories, he hopes it creates an open mind and open heart.
It's about sharing ideas and partitioning out ideas and feelings in a way where people can pick them up and understand them and carry them and repeat them and learn from them.
When we get into part 2, we'll learn about one story that really made a mark on his podcast series and why these episodes have served as a great push to opening up conversations on Black history in Maine.